Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this TradeStation Masterclass. My name is Jesus Nava. I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. Always a pleasure to be here to talk a little bit about the TradeStation technology, specifically on the technical analysis area. We're going to take a look at trend lines and some of the other drawing tools that are part of the TradeStation platform that give us a great collection of things that we can do on the chart in terms of analyzing the markets. So let's go ahead and take a look. Before I jump into today's topic, just keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only, that these are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, that active trading is not suitable for everyone, and past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. Thank you guys for being here. So let's go through the content of this presentation. Just a little bit of trend lines theory. What is a trend line? Is a drawing tool used in technical analysis to help determine the current direction or trend of market prices. In TradeStation, a trend line does much more than just giving you a line. So in addition to providing exit and entry points, depending on how you're using that trend line, whether it is breakouts or bouncing on the trend line, we're going to use it in so many other different ways, like measuring and changing the calculation of the trend line. So let's go ahead and take a look at the types of trend lines that are part of the TradeStation platform. First, freestyle allows you to draw a trend line in any angle and in any position you choose. You can reposition a freestyle trend line without any restrictions. So let's talk about freestyle and how you can draw it on TradeStation. Let me switch over to my TradeStation platform and open up a chart analysis. All right, here we go. Let me just open up my spacing here. This is Apple on a 5-minute time frame. Doesn't really matter which security we're using. I'm just going to switch this to a daily time frame. And I'm going to right click on one of these arrows and disable account orders and positions. One thing that was recently released with the TradeStation Desktop, and this is something that I wanted to highlight in today's class, is this Ask TS AI right here at the very top. You also find it if you go to apps and right here next to the TS Today button, there's a Ask TS AI. So we've introduced artificial intelligence into the TradeStation platform that searches through the help documentation and provides answers based on what's included in TradeStation. So feel free to use it. Let me show you an example. Let me go ahead and click on that little button and you'll see how this AI window pops up. I'm going to say I agree. And I'm just going to ask it, what is a trend line? So this should search all the documentation inside of the TradeStation platform and draft up an answer. Let's go ahead and see if it does. Okay, so we have the definition, analytical tool, the key characteristics. We have the types of trend lines. We have an uptrend, downtrend, and sideways. Purpose, drawing guidelines, and important note. Okay, if I wanted to be a little bit more specific and say, what is a freestyle trend line? Because that's the first type that we're going to take a look at. And I believe that when you draw a trend line on TradeStation, it's defaulted to freestyle. So let's go ahead and take a look at all the other ones that we don't usually take a look at. Freestyle trend line. So it does tell you that you can draw it in any angle and any position. Okay, so it does provide you a little bit of a definition of what a freestyle trend line is. So feel free to use the new AI tool inside of the TradeStation Desktop, especially if you're looking for information or documentation on some of the tools of the desktop. Let's go ahead and go to here to the drawing menu, and I'm going to select trend line. Since this is a class that we are going to do focused on drawing tools, let's go ahead and select this option from the menu that says drawing toolbar. Let me just click there, and that enables a vertical drawing toolbar right here on the left side of my chart. If you are the type of user that uses a lot of drawing tools, maybe this is convenient. It'll take a little bit of familiarity or a little bit of usage for you to become familiar with the tools. You can hover over them and the tip will tell you what they are. So this is horizontal line, this is vertical line, and if I'm looking for a trend line, it should be this one right here, trend line. I'm going to click it, and I said by default, it should draw a freestyle trend line. But my trend line, as you can see, it's attaching to the candles. I clicked up here, notice where the anchor went. And if I try to click up here, the trend line is always attached to the candlesticks. That is controlled by this setting in the drawing mode called snap mode. I had mine turned on so that everywhere you click, the drawing tool will automatically attach to the closest price that it sees on that particular candle or that particular bar. So if you wanted to have a real freestyle trend line, you need to make sure that snap mode is not selected. In this particular case, I'm going to click on this trend line that I drew. You're going to see that as you select drawing objects, you're going to see little white boxes appear on them. That is just an indication that the object has been selected. So if I look at my trend line, I see all these little white boxes. It just lets me know that I've selected it. If I click on the background, you can see how those little nods go away. And if I click the trend line one more time, it is selected, allowing me to press delete on my keyboard and get rid of that trend line. So any drawing tool that you draw that you want to get rid of, just click on it, make sure that it's selected, and then press delete on your keyboard. So now that I've disabled snap mode, and snap mode is, I think it's this one right here. Yeah, it's in the toolbar. It's called snap mode. It's off at the moment. So now if I go back to my trend line and I click up here where there are no candles, you can see that the trend line draws freestyle in any angle or direction that you want. One characteristic of drawing tools instead of TradeStation is that there's always going to be control knobs that you can move and change the direction of that trend line. Yes, smaller little dots across the line that identify a selected object, but two of them are going to be bigger. Those bigger nodes are the anchor or the control nodes. If I click on this very first one, I can put it anywhere I want. And if I click on the second one, notice that it'll change the angle of my trend line. So yes, there's always going to be two anchor points that control the direction and angle of any drawing tool. So make sure that you find them. Some of them will have one, some of them will have two, like in this case, a trend line, and some of them will have even three. Just be aware of how many bigger nodes a particular drawing tool has. Okay, so this is freestyle. Let's go back here to the PowerPoint. The next one is extreme. The extreme trend line attaches a positive sloping trend line to the lowest low of the beginning bar and to the highest high of the ending bar. And in a negative sloping trend line, it'll attach to the highest high of the beginning bar to the lowest low of the ending bar. This is an extreme trend line. So from high to low and from low to high, depending on the slope of that trend line. Of course, the trend line slope will be automatically calculated. So let's go back here to my TradeStation platform. I'm going to double click on this trend line. And in the calculation is where you set the type of trend line that you want. I'm going to set it to extreme and I'm going to click OK. As soon as I do that, then you see the trend line moving and attaching to my bars. I'm going to assume that the software identified the slope as being positive because it is an upward slanting trend line. And you can see how the anchor point on this candle went all the way to the low of the bar, and the second anchor went to the high of that bar. So it's all about the anchor points, where the anchor points are positioned. Now, if I were to change the direction of the trend line, let me go ahead and let me move my chart a little bit. Okay, there we go. So let me go ahead and click on the trend line. I'm going to put the first anchor point up here, and then I'm going to put the first or the second anchor point down here. So even if I try to move it up to a different price of this candle, it'll always attach to the bottom. In fact, let me see if I can zoom in to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to zoom in this area. The anchor point is right at the low of that candle. If I try to move that candle, I'm going to click and drag and try to put it on the high. Notice that it doesn't follow my cursor because it's an extreme calculation. It knows that the slope is negative and it has to attach from the highest point on that first anchor to the lowest point on that second anchor. So that's exactly what it's doing. Next, Trendline style is fixed point. Attaches to a specified price on the beginning and ending bars of the trend line. So as a user, you specify what those prices are going to be. So let me go back here to my trade station. Let me double click on that line. And this is a fixed point. So it's going to go from open to open, high to high, low to low, close to close, or through the midpoints of the candles. If I choose open, for example, this is a fixed point, you're going to see how the trend line shifted. Now, if I look at the anchor point at the very beginning, you can see how the trend line anchors or attaches to the opening of that candle. And on the ending candle, we knew that the anchor point was right here at the very low of the bar, but now is exactly at the opening of the bar. If I double click on the trend line and I choose a different calculation, let's do something like high plus low divided by 2 and click OK, you're going to see how that trend line is going to go through the half point of that candle. That's including from high to low, where that midpoint is, it automatically does the calculation for you. Pretty interesting, huh? Next trend line calculation is a regression. It draws a linear regression line based on the bar price selected for all bars included in the trend line. This regression calculation is also known as the best fit method. For example, selecting open plots a linear regression line based on the opening prices of all bars included in the trend line. Pretty interesting. It's a regression calculation. So if I were to double click here, and say regression, and I'm going to say based on the closing price, I'm going to click OK, and you can see how it shifts. Notice where the anchor went. Now the anchor point, it's not attached to a particular bar. It's attached to this bar, but it's not visually attached to it. It's just attached to it on the axis. But what it does, it just finds the closest distance from the line to all the closing prices between those two anchor points. And of course, we had a whole swatch of different candlesticks that closed much more lower than where our anchor was, and it had to attach because then again, it tries to find the best fit or the smallest distance between all the closing prices. And I'm saying closing prices because that's the price that is using for the regression. So interesting way of drawing that trend line. Let's go back here to my PowerPoint. The next one is a screen angle. You specify the angle at which you want the trend line and it does it for you. So let me go back here to TradeStation. I'm going to double click, say screen angle. Notice that it says 45 at the moment. I can put in any angle number or degrees. I'm going to click OK and notice that this is a perfect 45-degree angle trend line. If I wanted this to go in the opposite direction, I just need to type in a negative 45. And notice how it goes in the opposite direction. Of course, it goes from anchor to anchor, so I can move that, and then I'll have that angle going in the opposite direction. That's a negative 45. You can do a 90-degree angle, which will be a vertical line. So 90 vertical line. You would do, let me double click. Oh, no, I can't select it. Huh, interesting. So now I'm unable to select that trend line. It went into a vertical line. Let me right click. If you are unable to select it, a lot of times I see TradeStation users trying to select an object and they're unable to, not only because sometimes it's because graphics are a little bit too tricky or your mouse is not working, whatever the reason is, go here to drawing mode, snap mode. Here it is. Remove selected drawing objects. I can click here and then select to remove my trend line and then click OK. So if anything is not able to be clicked, or if you have way too many lines to click through, let's say that you've drawn like 20 or 30 different trend lines and horizontal lines, and then you want to clean your chart, you can go in there and select all. If you go there, it'll select all and delete rather than going one by one and pressing delete. Lastly, I think there is a Gann angle. It draws a trend line based on a specified time, which is your run, and a price, which is your rise. Run is represented by the number of bars, while rise is represented by the number of points a trend line rises per bar. For example, a trend line with a rise of 2 and run of 1 has a 2-to-1 price to time ratio. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example so we can understand this. I'm going to go here to my trend line, drawing toolbar. let's draw a trend line right here. Okay, that's my trend line. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to say Gan angle. So for, I can see the price scale here, no? Like this is 10 points. I'm looking at Apple. So one of the grid lines says 200, the next one says 210. So I know there's 10 points in between. So I can say for every 4 bars, for every 5 bars, so that would be, no, for every run, for every 5 bars, rise 10 points. And then click OK. Yeah, that's a little bit steep. Maybe instead of doing for every 5 bars, run 10, let me do 5. That should give me a better angle. There we go. So you determine how many bars to how many points in the price scale do you want that bar to have. That's more of a GAN fan type of calculation on the trend line. Makes it very interesting. And I think that's it. So yes, those are the different types of trend lines that are available on TradeStation. And also, one more thing. A lot of times I use trend lines as measurement. So if I go here to the trend line indicator and I go here from this low all the way to this high, I can double click on that trend line and show data. Well, not data, labels. Here, show labels. I'm going to show labels. I'm going to show the price percentage, the net change, show the anchor prices. Let me show everything and we can see what it looks like. I'm going to make it 12 and bold so we can see it much more clear. Okay, so right here at the bottom, it shows information on that trend line. And I see the 277, the 169. Okay, those are the anchor points. Okay, it goes from the bottom. So the bottom tells you 107.63 is the exact dollar value from that point that we clicked on at the bottom all the way to the top. There's $107 from one to the other. That is a 63.5% change if you were to calculate this on price change. It took 143 bars, which equates to 206 days, and the anchor points goes from 169 to 277. All that information right here on the candle. If I don't want those labels on the candle, yeah, that's fine. I can double click here and go here to labels and disable them. And I always have access to that information if I click on the trend line and I hold my mouse button. So there at the bottom, I see the angle, the net change, percent change, the bar count, the time span. So you don't necessarily have to enable the labels. You can just click on the trend line and hold your mouse button to get all that information as well. So yes, trend lines can be used as a measuring device by just clicking from point A to point B, and that it provides you the calculation for you. All right. And those are the trend lines, all the types of trend lines that are there. What I do on my trend lines is I also change the color and the thickness. I don't like the default color that TradeStation provides. I think they're very thin. If you like thin lines, they look very good if you have a very sharp monitor or you have high resolution. For webinars and for instructional videos, the line sometimes is a little thin. So I double click on the line, go to my style. Sometimes I change the thickness to the third one and I change the color something brighter. You can also work with transparencies. This is a nice tool of TradeStation that makes the line somewhat transparent. I'm going to click OK, and there we go. We changed it. Feel free to double click on that trend line, make changes to it. If you want those to be the default, just put a check where it says set as default. And every time that you draw that trend line, it should have those settings that you specified. Same applies with all other drawing tools in TradeStation. Right here from the top, crosshairs pointer. If you don't like the arrow, you'd rather have a cross, it's just a style preference. We have the Andrews pitchfork. You go from a top to a bottom to a top, or from a bottom to a top to a bottom. So it requires you to click 3 times. So the measurement and then the projection. If I wanted to add it or draw it differently, I go from a bottom to a top to a bottom or another bottom. Those are the type of things that you can do to the GAN fan. Again, every drawing tool in TradeStation, if you double click on it, you can change the lines of the GAN fan. You can change the calculation also. This is the standard pitchfork. You have the CHIF pitchfork or the modified CHIF. All those are available for you. Okay, and if you want to remove this, just click and remove. We have the GAN fan. Again, we click on one. Oh, the GAN fan is interesting because you have to draw it and then change the settings. So if we do it from here, from this low, and we wanted the lines to be more in relationship to this uptrend, we have to go in there and change this. So this is a points per bar. So this is a half a point per bar. That just means for every bar in the chart, how much movement there is. And we know we're looking at Apple, so there's big price movement based on the bars. So I can change that and say, instead of zero point 0.5, let's start with a 5 and see what that does. I'm going to click OK. And that, of course, is a little steep, but you get the idea. You have to tell it what's the point movement based on the run. The run here is per bar. And you can say, let me have 2 points per bar. There we go. Now we have something that's a little bit more in line to the one to one should go in line with the trend, and then the other lines are supporting lines. So if I wanted the one to one line to be a little bit more in line with that, maybe I need to continue to change this. Zero point 0.5, we had a 0.05 right before. Here we go. This is a one to one ratio. We made it in line with the current trend, and now we have the other lines in support of that GAN fan. So that's the way that you adjust the GAN fan to fit the data that you have on the chart. Let's remove that. Horizontal lines, vertical lines, pretty straightforward. You just click where you want that trend line to be. You can click and drag and push it up or down if you want to. One thing that I do tell TradeStation users is the value is shown here on the left-hand side. You can also enter the value by just double clicking and entering the price. So if I want my trend line to be at 250 exactly, instead of me trying to click and drag and drop it exactly at 250, I can just enter it in, click OK, and that data or that trend line or horizontal line will go exactly at the price that I specified. So the same for vertical lines. We do have a regression channel. Regression channel, similar to the regression trend line, it's just it draws a trend line from one point or one anchor to the next. So I can go here from this low over to this low, and then it draws a regression line between those points. You do decide which price is being used for the calculation. This is based on the open. And you also decide the standard deviations above and below those or that regression line. So those the yellow lines that go on either side of that regression trend line are based on standard deviations. Okay? Time cycle is interesting. Time cycle is just what the name implies. It's just going to create a cycle based on same distances from one to the next. So if I click one, you can see how the cycle shows right here at the bottom in the form of arcs. If you wanted vertical lines, just right click on it and say, or uncheck where it says arc style. It'll turn into vertical lines. And then let's say, for example, that I wanted to have the first line right on the very first day of the year. So let's say January 2nd of 2025. Let me go ahead and move this. I have to click on the drawing tool, move it back to the date that I want. So that is exactly on January 2nd. And then I have to move the other one. There we go. So now, so we click on one and drag it to the left to move it. We click on another anchor point and drag it to the right to increase the distance. So if I want to increase this to, I don't know, let me click it. There we go. I click it and then okay, wait, this is not dragging. Hold on. There we go. Okay, sometimes that actually dragged it. If I wanted to change the cycle, okay. It's a little tricky. All right, let's try that one more time. Okay, one. Yeah, sometimes I wanted to drag one. Let's drag it to, that's not working, to January 2nd. There we go. And the other one, I wanted to, there we go. We can drag it to something different. And that way, if we drag it based on a particular peak or a particular trough, we can see how many, it'll just measure that same distance of time on all the different segments. That's why it's called the time cycle. A little tricky, but valuable when you want to split up your chart into time segments. So that's the time cycle. That's over here. We talked about the trend line. A triangle, I haven't used triangles much. I think that's something new that was added to TradeStation not a long time ago. So it just specifies the three different prices that you click on, and then it creates a shade inside the triangle. If you double click on it, you can extend the lines, you can change the calculation, and even the labels if you want to remove the labels. Okay, let me remove that triangle. And again, we can always use the AI tool that was incorporated into TradeStation to search any documentation. TradeStation provides help documentation on all these drawing tools. So if you're looking for a little bit more of an overview and a little bit more information about the tools, use the AI to find that information. So we have all the Fibonacci drawing tools. We do a whole class based on Fibonacci and talk about the different settings. And the other ones are just markings. Like if you want to do an arc or an arrow or draw an ellipse or a rectangle or add text to your chart, you can do that right on there. All right. So those are some of the drawing tools that I wanted to highlight today, specifically the trend line and show you all the different styles that are there. Just keep that in the back of your mind because at any moment, using a different type of trend line is something that you're going to need, especially if you want to measure something from point A to point B, or if you want to fit your trend line to extreme type of calculation, or make it more like a regression calculations. All those are part of the trend line settings. In addition to that, remember snap mode. Remember the ability to remove drawing objects from that main menu, and you'll become a master of all the TradeStation drawing tools. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. This class is being recorded if you want to review it, but have a wonderful afternoon and check out the events calendar for any upcoming classes. Goodbye, everyone. Great having you.